Scene 2 deepens the anthology's interest in cheerleading, ambition, and women's relationships by centering a conversation in which a young cheerleader's hopes for attending the University of Thornhill become entangled with questions about identity, belonging, influence, and the expectations attached to entering a new community. The scene begins after an already familiar exchange between neighbors, with the older woman asking whether the younger woman's mother expects her home soon. The answer establishes an atmosphere of privacy. Her mother believes she is helping her grandfather, leaving the two women with time to talk without interruption. Almost immediately, however, the conversation shifts from casual companionship toward the younger woman's future. She hopes to obtain a cheerleading scholarship to Thornhill and appears confident that her talent will be enough. Her neighbor challenges that confidence, explaining that admission is competitive and suggesting that other applicants have relied upon personal connections and additional effort. This introduces a central theme of the scene, the uncertainty young women can experience when institutional success seems dependent not only upon ability, but also upon access, social networks, and the approval of people who already possess power. The older woman says she has a sister connected to the university and might be able to put in a good word, but she presents that assistance as carrying expectations. From an ethical perspective, this immediately complicates their relationship. The younger woman is ambitious, inexperienced, and eager for an opportunity, while the older woman controls information and potentially valuable access. Their conversation, therefore, cannot be understood solely as flirtation or discovery. It also concerns power and the vulnerability created when someone's aspirations depend upon another person's favor. The university itself becomes almost mythic in their discussion. Thornhill is described as a place with a strong culture of women loving women, and the younger woman reacts with uncertainty because she has apparently never seriously considered what such an environment might mean for her. When asked whether she is uncomfortable with women, she answers that she has never really had to answer that question. This is perhaps the most revealing line in the scene because it captures the difference between having no identity and simply never having been asked to examine assumptions that seemed automatic. Many queer women recognize this experience. Heterosexuality is often treated as a default requiring no explanation, while attraction between women is framed as something that must be discovered, confessed, justified, or labeled. The younger woman's uncertainty, therefore, does not necessarily indicate rejection. Instead, it suggests that she is encountering a question for which her previous environment gave her little vocabulary. Her hesitation becomes a moment of self-reflection. She is being asked to imagine herself in a community organized around possibilities she had previously understood only from a distance. The older woman's description of her sister reinforces this theme, although it does so through stereotypes that deserve criticism. She recalls that her sister once had long hair before cutting it short and becoming visibly associated with lesbian identity. The dialogue relies on familiar cultural shorthand linking appearance, athleticism, short hair, and queerness. Such stereotypes can sometimes function as recognizable community codes, particularly in eras when LGBTQ+ people relied upon subtle signs to identify one another. But they can also flatten the enormous diversity of lesbian and bisexual women. Femininity, masculinity, hairstyle, clothing, and athletic interests do not determine orientation. A queer reading can therefore acknowledge the historical resonance of these codes, while resisting the suggestion that there is one correct way for a lesbian to look. The younger woman's confusion about the word partners similarly reflects how language changes across generations and communities. The older woman explains that she means women forming relationships with women, turning what initially sounds mysterious into something straightforward. This exchange highlights how queer relationships have often been described indirectly because social institutions did not always provide equal recognition. Words such as partner historically carried special importance for same-gender couples who could not necessarily access marriage or who wanted language outside conventional heterosexual roles. The scene's references to relationships that could not be legally recognized place its playful dialogue against a broader history in which lesbian couples frequently had to explain bonds that society refused to name properly. That history helps explain why visibility matters. Being able to say that women love women without euphemism represents cultural progress, yet visibility alone does not guarantee respect. The older woman's exaggerated claim that everyone at Thornhill is a lesbian turns queer community into campus mythology. On one level, this functions comically, but on another, it reflects the way queer spaces are often imagined by outsiders as mysterious worlds governed by completely different rules. In reality, LGBTQ+ communities contain the same diversity, uncertainty, disagreement, friendship, ambition, and ordinary life found anywhere else. The younger woman's potential transition into such a space should therefore be understood not as entry into an exotic world, but as exposure to a wider range of possibilities for understanding herself. Her nervousness is significant precisely because she does not know what those possibilities will mean. She admits feeling uneasy when the older woman suggests introducing her to the sister who might help with university admission. That nervousness deserves to be taken seriously. The older woman tells her she needs to relax, but an emotionally grounded reading should distinguish reassurance from pressure. If someone is uncertain, genuine care requires allowing that uncertainty rather than treating it as an obstacle to be overcome. This becomes especially important because the younger woman's educational ambitions are part of the conversation. She should never have to prove personal openness in exchange for academic access. The scene's setup therefore exposes a power imbalance that a critical queer analysis cannot ignore. Representation of lesbian relationships becomes more meaningful when consent, autonomy, and boundaries are treated as essential rather than inconvenient. Women loving women should not be framed as inherently transgressive, but neither should queer identity be used to excuse coercive dynamics. Taking lesbian relationships seriously means applying the same ethical standards of mutual respect that should govern every relationship. The conversation then shifts toward the younger woman's mother, who works a night shift at a hospital. The younger woman initially worries that her mother might return, while the neighbor remembers her schedule and confidently predicts that she will remain away until morning. They eventually go looking for her and discover that she is not home. This domestic setting introduces another recurring theme: the relationship between private identity and family oversight. The younger woman is still situated within her mother's household and expectations, even as she begins imagining college as a place of independence. Her mother's absence creates temporary freedom, but it also emphasizes how much of the younger woman's current life is structured around parental knowledge and permission. College represents a potential transition away from that structure. For many LGBTQ+ young adults, leaving home can create the first opportunity to encounter people, communities, and language that make previously unexamined feelings easier to understand. Yet independence can also make young people vulnerable to people who claim to possess the knowledge or connections necessary to navigate unfamiliar environments. The scene captures both possibilities at once. Thornhill represents freedom, but access to Thornhill is presented through gatekeepers. Queer community represents possibility, but the older woman describes it through expectations rather than open exploration. The younger woman therefore stands between liberation and pressure, making her uncertainty central to the scene's emotional meaning. While they wait for her mother, the conversation becomes quieter and more personal. The older woman compliments the mother's appearance, and the younger woman remarks that they look alike. This small exchange again connects identity across generations. The daughter recognizes herself partly through resemblance to her mother, even as she is preparing for a future that may differ substantially from the life her mother imagined. That tension is familiar to many women. Growing up often involves deciding which inherited traits, expectations, and values feel genuinely one's own and which need to be reconsidered. Queer self-recognition can intensify this process because sexuality may challenge assumptions about marriage, family, gender expression, or adulthood that were absorbed long before anyone consciously questioned them. The younger woman does not arrive at a clear label during the scene. Instead, she experiences curiosity, nervousness, and uncertainty. This restraint is valuable because not every moment of queer recognition needs to culminate in an immediate declaration. Sometimes the most truthful representation is simply a person realizing that a question exists. The later interaction between the women should likewise be understood through emotional rather than physical detail. As they wait together, their conversation becomes increasingly intimate, and the older woman repeatedly encourages the younger woman to relax. Compliments and gentle attention create a sense of closeness, but the younger woman's question, "What are you doing?" preserves her uncertainty. The older woman answers by calling her cute, which offers affection without actually resolving the underlying question. This ambiguity is crucial. The younger woman is navigating feelings while simultaneously navigating another person's influence. A responsible reading, therefore, keeps her agency at the center. The emotional significance lies not in whether she immediately adopts a lesbian identity, but in whether she gains the freedom to determine what she wants without her scholarship ambitions, social expectations, or another person's confidence making the decision for her. This distinction speaks directly to broader LGBTQ+ experiences. Queer women are frequently asked to translate complex emotional histories into simple labels for other people's convenience. Someone may ask when they knew, as though identity must have a single origin point. Yet self-recognition can develop gradually through friendships, admiration, discomfort, curiosity, memories, and encounters that only acquire meaning later. The younger woman's statement that she has never had to answer whether she is comfortable with women captures this gradual process beautifully. The question itself may matter more than whatever answer she eventually gives. It creates space for introspection. The scene also explores how ambition can become intertwined with identity. Cheerleading is not merely a hobby for her, it is potentially a route to university and a future beyond her current environment. Because the older woman connects that ambition with Thornhill's queer culture, the younger woman is forced to imagine professional, social, and personal transformation simultaneously. This mirrors the experience of many young adults who discover new dimensions of themselves during educational transitions. College can introduce new communities and loosen the surveillance of hometown expectations. For queer women, that change can be particularly significant when earlier environments offered few openly LGBTQ+ role models. Yet the scene also warns that new communities can contain their own hierarchies. A space being queer does not automatically make every interaction equitable. Gatekeeping, status, age, money, popularity, and institutional connections still shape relationships. The older woman's ability to pull strings symbolizes these unequal forms of access. Her offer may appear generous, but because it is accompanied by expectations, it raises the question of whether assistance remains assistance when someone feels indebted in return. This issue extends far beyond sexuality. Women frequently encounter professional situations in which mentorship and opportunity come bundled with expectations that complicate genuine freedom. The scene works as a cautionary exploration of belonging, rather than a simple story of romantic awakening. Thornhill represents possibility, community, and a vocabulary for understanding relationships, but the younger woman must still be allowed to approach that world on her own terms. Her nervousness is not something to defeat, it is information about where her boundaries stand. For lesbian and queer viewers, this distinction is essential. Another woman may inspire recognition, provide language, or make previously hidden possibilities imaginable, but she cannot decide someone else's identity. Authentic connection requires room for hesitation, reconsideration, and refusal alongside curiosity and affection. The cheerleader's journey, therefore, remains unfinished, appropriately so. She is approaching adulthood, college, and a community different from the one she knows. Her challenge is learning that liberation should expand her choices rather than replace one set of expectations with another. Ultimately, becoming visible means gaining the freedom to recognize and define herself.